Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Can I suggest, I want to make this interactive. You're all at the minute muted. Please unmute yourselves, as long as there's sort of no motorhead blaring in the background. But please unmute yourself, because I want you to be able to ask questions all the time. What I'm going to do is, I'm just going to set it up and introduce what bright spark ideas I've got. And then I'm going to try and upload or share rather my PowerPoint presentation with you. The only problem with that is that it's a PowerPoint with voiceover. So that'd be quite complicated if it's voiced over and I'm nattering at you as well. So we need to mute that. But luckily, I have a professional with me from our university. She will control me and make sure I do the right thing. So just to confirm, can you all hear me? Are you all unmuted? You want to wave or something or other? Yep, that's good. A thumbs up. Hi, John. Hi, Nick. It's good I can see your names at least. Good. Okay. So I assume everybody's now unmuted, and please chip in. You know, this isn't a blah 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 session with me just going on and on and on. This is for your benefit, and it's really important to me that you interact with me and ask whatever. What this is about is I've got a series of slides to share with you about the mess this world is in, and I want to persuade you, really, to do something about it. We're right in the middle of a global crisis, aren't we? This pandemic has whacked the daylights out of everything. It's changed the way that everybody thinks. It's changed the emphasis in society. You know, people are now no longer perhaps as preoccupied as they were with whatever it is. All of a sudden, this is top priority, isn't it? You know, none of us can escape. And this brilliant organism called a virus, and they are brilliant, aren't they? Because they can't move on their own. They can't even reproduce on their own. And yet they've got us by the throat. Brilliant. You've got to take your hat off to evolution. These are the winners, aren't they? So there they are, spreading themselves around the world and affecting every level of society from top to bottom, everywhere that we go. And understandably, this is a game changer. Everybody's now preoccupied with what we're going to do about the virus. You know, what about future pandemics, et cetera, et cetera. I'll come back to one of those in a minute. An interesting follow-up over the last couple of days. But the point is that around the world right now, there is laboratory after laboratory, scientist after scientist, virologist after virologist, working frantically to produce a vaccine and also improve the way that the treatment can subsequently be handed out, so that our death rates go down, et cetera, et cetera. So in other words, it'll be over. You know, this pandemic will pass. Although it's pretty difficult at the minute to imagine this, particularly if any of you are listening to this, you're in Leicester, you've suddenly gone back into lockdown. Of course, this will happen quite often, I suspect. You know, it'll be over. But the problem is that the situation regarding the environment isn't over. And it's not something that stops. The virus goes on, and we're preoccupied with that. All the time that's happening, the clock is ticking for the environment. Every second that I'm speaking, things are happening around our planet, and they're not going to be fixed by some laboratory coming up with a vaccine or something like that, or some sort of treatment. Because what the world is facing is an unprecedented catastrophe. And in a way, it won't actually matter about the blooming virus unless we solve some of these other problems, because that's going to be the least of our difficulties. We've got to deal with the most massive global environmental problems. And one of the things that always concerns me is how we as human beings always think that, well, it's all right, you know, they'll sort it out, some other organization will sort of, some other country. And that's not the case. The problem is we share this planet, and every last one of us, whether we like it or not, most of us don't like it, it's going to affect us. So that's the backlog. I'm going to try and persuade you it's going to be uncomfortable. I hope it is, because that's the idea. This isn't a cozy little session. This is to get you worried about the mess we're in and what you've got to do about it. Because unless you do something about it, there is no future. The problem is that every human being on the planet has got to take a responsibility for what we're doing and try and do something about it. Now, I'm a very, very lucky academic. Every year, I get this great bunch of boys and girls in front of me who are going to chip on their shoulder. They want to save Wales, they want to save coral reefs, they want to save the Iraq, whatever it is, right? They've got a desire in them to do something about it. What they want out of me and my colleagues is the skills and knowledge to do something about it. And that for me is a win. That's why education is so powerful. That's why it's the most important resource on the planet. Because once you get people motivated, no amount of tanks, no amount of Kalashnikovs can stop them. Once you start an education tsunami, there's no way you're going to stop it. That's why governments around the world, they try and suppress education. They don't want people educated. They don't want you to know and understand. They want you to fall for the drivel and indoctrination they're pouring down your throat. And the other thing about education is you can be the richest person on the planet, be a multi-billionaire, whatever they are, this lot, we read about them all the time. Yeah, you can buy yourself fancy stuff. You can buy yourself all the intrinsic trimmings that you want. One thing you can't buy on this planet, though, is intelligence, isn't it? You can buy your way into the top school. You can buy your way into universities, but you can't buy brains. And that is a commonality across all of humankind. It doesn't matter who we are and where we come from. Intelligence is a commonality. And it's not regulated by anything else. It's not regulated by money or economics or whatever. It's regulated by what you're born with and the ability that you have to utilize that. And that's why it's dangerous. That's why they don't like you being educated, because once you have an educated population, they can very quickly realize that there are different ways and different directions that society has to go in. And that's why I do what I do. I'm really lucky, aren't I? I get all these fabulous kids in front of me. And I have to say, not just kids. A lot of people will start on a career and then realize perhaps there's more to life than just buying an iPhone 8, iPhone 9, or whatever it is, changing your BMW every 5 minutes, all that stuff. They realize that the materialistic world we live in is actually disastrous. And they decide they're going to come back into education and try and train up. I've just been checking my LinkedIn. I check my LinkedIn every day. And I'm stunned by what jumps out at me and where they are. They're scattered around the world in every type of environment and every type of situation you can possibly manage. Most of them in very, very senior and influential positions, which heartens me that actually they're in positions where they can make any change. Right, what I'm going to do now is, and bear with me if I muck this up, because I'm bound to, because we're only stupid academics, we're not techie people. I'm going to share my screen with you and my PowerPoint. It was published in advance. I don't know if any of you have had a chance to look at it. If you've had a chance, can you stick your thumbs up or something and say, yes, I've seen it? Anybody seen it? Not getting anything, no. And you're all still muted. Are you scared to talk to me? Is this what it is? You're still worried. Okay, I'll share the screen. And right, this is the PowerPoint that I published in advance. It's actually got voiceover. I think it's muted at the minute. Is that all right, Shauna? Can you confirm? Can you see it? So it's muted. Okay, right. What I'm going to do is run through this with you. And if you've got anything you want clarified, just shout. There's no point in me sitting here and just dribbling on at you lot unless it actually gets you going. Right, that's me. You can see who I am. So I have this fancy title, Associate Professor. I'm also the admissions tutor, and I've been doing that for ever since this degree in environmental science here at Plymouth started that. That's 46 years. So I've got a bit of experience about admission. I'm the bloke, actually, if you apply, who will read your personal statement and read what your teacher says about you. And it's so funny seeing the difference between what teachers say and what they and I have to say, in so many cases, what the schools think about you is completely wrong. I pay more attention to what you say, what the student says, than actually what the formal reference is about. As you can see, I'm also an academic lead for international recruitment. I spend a lot of time just persuading students all over the world to come and study here in Plymouth. That picture, by the way, on the right is from our Malaysian residential field trip. It's at a place called Frim, Forest Research Institute in Malaysia, Kampong Kempong. And this tree is called Dryopanarox aromatica, which is the natural source of camphor. And why it's amazing. Look at those. Look at it. It looks like a load of waterways. You see those little white bits? That's where the canopy, if you look at the canopy, if you look up at this thing, it's about 30 meters above your head, by the way. Each canopy doesn't overlap the other one. And here we are, great scientists, aren't we? We go to the moon, go to Mars. We don't know how they do that. How does a tree know where another tree is? It's got no eyes, no nerves, no nothing, and yet they know. In fact, we got an idea. We climbed up there and actually taken samples, and there's heavy chemicals that they emit. Ketones on. Somehow or other, they said so. The only reason I put that up is to show you the beauty of the biosphere and make us realise that for all of our so-called cleverness, there's a lot we don't know, and that's so flipping true. Here we go. Okay, right. Now, look at the left-hand box. This is the one that's important because of our technology and science, which motors along relentlessly in all sorts of directions, isn't it? That puts even more strain upon the planet. We've only got the one planet. There it is. Look at it. This little blue marble there, whacking through space. Think about 180,000 kilometers an hour. That's nippy, isn't it? We're doing that right now. Whacking through space on up and down, rock and roll circuit, spinning and stuff. And there you are. It's a closed system. And everything that we need for our technological development, our scientific understanding, et cetera, and the things that keep us alive, come from that one lump of rock. Just the one planet. Well, so fast has been our technical development, particularly over the last couple of 300 years, with the Industrial Revolution, all the things spinning up from that actually right now, as you can see, to meet our current needs, we need 1.6 planets. Well, we've only got the one, mate, and by 2035, that's only 15 years, we're going to need 2 planets. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Try and print another planet, use the printer bit and see whether we can do that. August 22nd, 2012 was what they call Earth Overshoot Day. That was the day it really did flip. From then on in, we've been using resources faster than the planet can actually survive. So there you go. We're living beyond the ecological capacity of the planet. And then when you look at the right-hand bit here, that natural environment that sources everything we need, we use around about 55 billion tons of resources every year. So that's made up of biomass, living bit, fossil fueled energy, whole caboodle. And that's equivalent to, if we take every human being on the planet, that works out around about 10 tons per head of population. But of course, that's skewed. That's, that reflects the big differences. So if you even it out, that's what we've got. That's unsustainable. The other problem is 85% of the species that make up our biosphere, we don't know what they are. We don't know what role they play. I clicked on a website a couple of days ago, and some researchers looking at soils in the Amazon, and they said a teaspoon of soil in the Amazon contains at least 500 species unknown to science, fungi and bacteria and goodness knows what. Here we are exploiting a planet about which we know so very little, and particularly the living bit, because the living bit is what it's about, isn't it? Look at this. That little box came from the Millennium Report in the year 2000, because it was the Millennium 2,000 years. The United Nations Environment Programme published this simple diagram. It was just to try and get people to understand how dependent we entirely are upon the biosphere. And we are. So the idea was, if you look at the stuff on the left-hand side and stuff on the right-hand side, what the biosphere does for us a bit, what the Romans ever done for us, the arrows go in either direction. We cannot extricate ourselves from our dependence on the planet around us, because underneath everything, underneath our clothes and our Zoom and all this other stuff, we're just an animal. And we're no different from any other animal on the planet. We're a heterotroph. That means other feeding. You and I are completely dependent and subservient upon the biosphere. No biosphere, no you. And in fact, like every other animal, and we are in the same category as even the simplest animal on the planet, we are totally dependent upon the biosphere to survive, because the biosphere contains things called autotrophs, self-feeding organisms. They're the things that convert light energy into chemical energy through that fabulous process called photosynthesis. They're called plants. No plants, no animals. It's that simple. There's no in between, no if and but. If there are no plants, there will be no animals because we can't do what plants do. We can't convert light energy into chemical energy. We can't make organic molecules. And of course, when they do that, they take incoming solar radiation, they take carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, water, from the atmosphere of soil, a few inorganic elements, and they make a hydrocarbon. No animal on the planet can make that, and no animal on the planet can convert light energy into chemical energy. And when they do that through photosynthesis, their waste product is oxygen. So no plants, nothing. Of course, plants were on the planet before us, and I can bet you the way we're going, they'll be here long before we cleared off. So when you look at the statistics, they're frightening. Over the last 200 or 300 years, we've seen massive declines in every aspect of the biosphere. I've just plucked a couple out from 81% decline in freshwater species or something. Half of the vertebrate species, especially mammals, that's you and me, we're mammals, have gone since 1970, over the last 50 years. The other problem is, of course, the Earth isn't a uniform environment. Life is spread across it very unevenly. You know, if you go in a desert, there's going to be less plants, for example, than there are animals or organisms than if you go in the rainforest, etc. If you go up mountains and everything. And unfortunately, most of the Earth species are concentrated in very few relatively small areas. So look at the stats: 25 regions occupy just 1.4% of the Earth's land surface, but they contain half of all the plants, all the plant species, and a third of all terrestrial vertebrate species. And all of these areas, all of these 25, are in trouble. There's where we got all the problems: political instability, insurgency, guerrilla action, rampant inflation, corruption. All of those things are in the blooming areas, the very areas where we've got our highest life forms. So population's got a lot to do with it, of course. Look at this. This is staggering, isn't it? 10 billion of us by 2050. One of the markers there, if you can read it down, and you can look at this afterwards at detail, you'll see that in 1960, around about that time, the population of the planet was 3 billion. Well, I was at school in 1960, getting ready to go to university. So in my lifetime, I've seen the population of the planet more than double. It's now 7.8 billion and rising. It's going to be 10 billion by 2050. But in a way, values like that, I don't know about you, but I can't cope with 10 billion. It just blows my head apart. But look at the other statistics, which I can cope with. I'm talking to you right now, and every minute I'm talking to you, we're going to be adding 150 extra human beings to the world's population. All the people who are currently being born, all the people who are currently dying, that's your surplus. And that works out at around about 250,000 every day, just under 250,000 every day. And that, as it coincidentally, that's the size of the city. I'm here in Plymouth, give or take. Plymouth is around about that figure. So it means that we've got to find somewhere to put another Plymouth tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after. And with these numbers, by the weekend, which is when they can open the pubs up again, aren't they? Oh my goodness, there's going to be an extra billion people on the planet. What are we going to do with these? What are we going to do with this level of growth? 2 extra human beings every second. What they're going to live, where's the water coming from, where's the food, etc. These are real. This isn't a joke. This is real, and it's happening all the time while we're reading about what the government are going to do about coronavirus or whatever. Every second, 2 extra mouths to feed. Every second, every 2 creatures to give water to, etc., etc. How are we going to do it? And when you look at where the population is skewed, look at the one in the top right hand there. India and China lead the way, but some of the other countries are coming up faster, as fast as you can possibly imagine. So we're seeing doubling and tripling of populations because the medicine's getting better, the food supply is getting better, technology, etc., etc. And this means we're bound to be in trouble. Again, as human beings, we make decisions which seem sensible at the time. And one of the areas, of course, that we're looking at the moment is changing our lifestyles. And I'm sure you're all aware of this. There's a lot going on in terms of debate about what we should eat, how we should manage our diets better, not just from a nutritional point of view, but of course from an environmental point of view. And meat's been on the agenda, hasn't it? It's been looked at quite closely. And of course, you see, 1,000 years ago, the impact that human beings could have by agroecosystems, either growing food on arable land or grazing animals on grazing pastoral land, the impact was minimal. But you see, as our population has shot through the roof, it's no longer minimal. And we can't really, we've only got a fixed amount of land. And we can only grow a fixed amount of resource on that. And a lot of that land, of course, is natural ecosystem. So we've got this choice that we have to chop things down or plow them up or whatever it is to meet our increasing demand for food. And therefore, we need to examine that. We're doing it the right way. If you look at this chart here, you'll see that so much of the surface of the earth is now pasture land. It means you're growing cows, pigs, sheep, goats, whatever it is, chickens, for meat. And that, of course, puts it in direct conflict with all the other resources on the planet. And of course, meat production is particularly heavy on the environment. It takes around about 20,000 litres of water to produce a kilo of beef. It only takes 200 litres of water to produce a kilo of broccoli. But of course, you then run into misconceptions in society. Yeah, but meat's full of protein, meat's the best thing for it, all this sort of stuff. Completely wrong. There's more protein in broccoli than there is meat. But of course, we have cultural issues here, don't we? Blokes don't eat broccoli, do they? I'm a tough geezer. I'm going to eat the steak, etc., etc. All of these things need to be overcome. But just if the Americans just reduce their meat consumption by 2 meals a week, that's what they've got to do. That would make America self-sufficient in oil again. Why? Because all the fertilizers that we use, all of the pesticides that we use, whether herbicides, fungicides, all come from oil. So, a simple adjustment like that can have the most dramatic effect because now there are so many of us, and that's the problem. Water. There's a wonderful poem by Coleridge, and if you haven't read Coleridge, do so, because he was stoned out of his brain when he did his best work, even opium eater. So a lot of his stuff is really, really quite entertaining. And of course, he wrote The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Water, water everywhere, ne'er a drop to drink, because they were becalmed in a sea and stuck. They didn't know they were an estuary. It was fresh water at the site, because if you drink seawater, you go bonkers. You would think that with just 99.7% of water on the planet in an unavailable form to us, either as seawater or locked up in ice and snow, that the 0.3% that we got left, we look after. No. We treat it with utter contempt and utter disregard in every respect. The top left is Guangzhou, the former canton in China. You just swing in the rivers. Who the hell cares? Nobody really bothers about what the consequences are. And again, when we go back to agriculture, look at the little circular stuff down in the bottom right. It shows you, what we use our water for. We're using so much of our water for agriculture. So there you are. Most of the water, 70-odd%. Yeah, there we are. We capture it, we clean it up, we sanitize it, and then we pour it onto land to grow grass, so we can have a hamburger. Things like this need to be re-examined. It really is a serious situation. And again, you can look at some of the stats in the bottom left there. What gets me is what's going on in India. There's 21 Indian cities of more than 8 million people. That's big. 21 cities with 8 million people. They're going to run out of water fairly soon. That's it. In fact, some of them are already running up. And what the government are doing is they're bussing in water in tankers. I mean, it's frightening to think that that's the stage we got at, where the rivers are dry, groundwater's gone, and people are now going to be reliant upon water being bussed in. That's the mess we've got ourselves into. The top one, again, have a look at it at your leisure, but basically anything that's red, orange, or yellow is in big trouble. So much of Africa, of course, is a real critical issue because it's now seen as the new economic boom area. It's regarded as the new Southeast Asia. So instead of being a tiger economy, which is Southeast Asia, it's called the lion economy. It's the lion. And of course, the interesting one is look at that little tiny island on the western fringe of Europe. It's called Britain. We love jokes about the weather here in the UK. Oh, it's always raining. Pack a back country, bring your umbrella, and yet it couldn't be more wrong. With climate change coming in, we're going to change. And London is one of those major cities, you look at the list on there, that can actually run out of water. So the Brits, we're going to have to change our jokes, aren't we, about it always raining in Manchester and wherever it is. And it doesn't. CO2, of course, is the beauty, isn't it? This is the climate change one. They've gone from 400 parts per million, now 280 parts per million, just in 1880, just what's that, 50 years? Gone through. The planet has seen these things before. There's no arguing about that. Trump going on about this is nothing new. He's right in that respect. What's different and what is unique, and I use the word correctly, is the speed of change. The last time we saw it go from 280 parts per million to 400 parts per million was in Permian times. And that took 185,000 years. So the planet can adjust, all the feedback loops can adjust. What we've done is introduce a rate of change which is unprecedented. In fact, that's the biggest impact human beings have had right across the environment, is the changes are not new. Species become extinct, species survive, species change, but it's the speed of change. And it doesn't give the system, particularly the biosphere, enough time to adjust. That's why we're seeing extinction rates, which are also unprecedented. The problem is that nearly 2/3 of all the CO2 we emit comes from just two sources: power production and industry. And of course, it's very sensitive for any government or economist or economy to do anything about that. So we didn't go for the soft underbelly. I mean, the ridiculous one actually is air travel. Less than 3% of the CO2 comes from flights, but it looks a soft target. Looks if you're doing something. In fact, if this country, if our elegant prime minister was to switch off all the CO2 sources in the United Kingdom tomorrow and announce to the world the UK is going CO2 free, it would have a global impact of less than 3%. Because again, most of the 2/3 of the CO2 is coming from two countries, and they haven't signed up for any of the protocols, the Kyoto Agreement, Paris Agreement, etc., etc. Those two countries, of course, the United States and China, which are locked in a battle of the economic giants, and they're not really going to make a concession. All sorts of things happen with CO2. I just put just one thing up there. For example, look at the flowering time. Some of the plants are flowering here in the UK earlier than the last 250 years when we started recording. That sounds good. So you've got pretty flowers everywhere. The trouble is the things that pollinate them haven't woken up yet. So it all goes belly up because it's all out of sync. If you look at Trump and New York, I sent him a text, Twitter or whatever it is he uses, asking him, saying, look, here's the latest model from Geneva about climate change. One of the places that's going to be underwater significantly, unless you do something about it, is New York. Where's the Trump Tower? You'll find it's underwater, Donald, but he hasn't replied yet. The little wormy thing on the left, I have to put that in as a joke, is called Dimorphis Donald Trumpii. It looks like a worm. It's actually an amphibian, so it's related to frogs, discovered by a group of research zoologists in Mesoamerica, Honduras, and places like that. And why they nicknamed it, or why they officially named it, not nicknamed it, officially named it, Dimorphis Donald Trumpii, is that when it's scared, it sticks its head in the sand to try and hide from the truth and reality. And I find that quite an interesting simile for our President of the United States, who's in denial about all the scientific evidence about climate change because it doesn't suit his political agenda. There's interesting parallels in history about that. If you look at the 17th century, the world thought, or scientists and societies thought, that the Earth was the center of the universe. Now along comes this Polish mathematician called Copernicus. He says, no, look, see, I've been on my calculator, got it all wrong, you see. I do my sums, and see what actually is the sun's the center of the universe. And all the planets, including us, go around it. And that caused such a social outrage, they went into denial. They arrested him and beat him up, goodness knows what, until he rescinded his truth. We're in the same situation. You can't deny science, just because it doesn't suit you, even though it might be uncomfortable. You have to accept that's how it is. And I find it ridiculous that a politician can turn around and say, yeah, well, I agree in, theory of relativity equals mc squared, but I don't agree with this because it doesn't suit my particular view. That's ridiculous and dangerous and should not be tolerated by us under any circumstances. It really is ridiculous that situation. Plastics, if you look us up on the internet, Plymouth is one of the leading institutions. There's lots of them around the world now, but they're spearheading this research into plastic, which is frightening. Plastic's great. It's a wonderful material. It's really useful and cheap to produce. The problem, as usual, is not the product. It's not plastic isn't evil. It's the way that we blooming well use it. The trouble is, it is so cheap that it almost is. It's not worthwhile in many cases. Reusing it or alternative storage devices are more expensive. So, of course, we end up with this throwaway society. And we focused on the oceans. There's more microplastics. Microplastics, when plastics eventually do break down, it takes 450 years for a plastic bottle, for example, to break down. When they do break down, they break down into things called microplastics. And these are everywhere now. We found them in sediments in the deep oceans, even the Marianas Trench. They're in the atmosphere. They're all over the place. It's causing us massive problems. A lot of the publicity about plastic in the ocean focuses on the macro bit. So, the poor old turtle there mistakes the plastic bag for jellyfish. That's its food source. dolphins get caught up in it, etc., etc. But the real danger is the fact that these microplastics are everywhere and in just about everything. No question, if you eat fish and shellfish, you're going to be eating your own Coca-Cola bottle. It's recycled all the time. Look at the little box in the middle there when you've got a chance to look at it. Look at the number, we're saying it's 1 million bottles every minute. So only some percent of those will be recycled because it's actually uneconomic to do so. So only 7% end up as recycled bottles. So even though that's nice, pretty little triangle on the side of the bottle or container, actually it doesn't get converted back into. It's cheaper for them to landfill it, incinerate it, or sling it into the oceans. The oceans are a big deal, aren't they? 3/5 of the planet is ocean. The problem is, who owns it? Who owns the middle of the Atlantic? Who owns the middle of the Pacific? Who owns the middle of the South China Sea? The answer is no one. Because you see, we got locked ourselves into a ridiculous social situation where we talk about bits of the planet that we own. They're called countries. There are no countries. There's rock, soil, water, air, etc., etc. But we take stewardship. This is Britain. So we set up a series of laws to protect what we do in Britain, and any other sovereign state that tries to interfere, we give them a slapping, and vice versa. You can't walk into the middle of France, start digging holes, because as I say, you can't do that, mate, because this is France. That's all right, but it's not all right, because it means that we compartmentalize the planet. And that is unmanageable as far as the planet's concerned, because the planet doesn't recognize countries, does it? When you see a view of the planet from Earth, there's no squiggly lines on it. There's Kenya, there's Uganda, there's Tanzania. There's just a load of rocks and soil and deserts and forest and goodness knows what. It's the same when we travel, isn't it? This is your captain speaking. We're about to start our descent into German airspace. What do you mean German airspace or French airspace? There's just 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen. That's your lot, mate. You can call it what you like. When you look out the window, there's no wall saying, welcome to German airspace or welcome to UK airspace. These are cultural things. Even the way that we talk about our nationality is a joke. Hello, I'm British. Hello, I'm Chinese. No, you're not. Call yourselves out if you like. You're not. You are Homo sapiens. And there's 7.8 billion of you on the planet, and you look the same. 2 legs, 2 arms, 2 eyes, 2 ears, a nose, and you all carry in every cell of every 7.8 billion the human genotype for the whole different versions of how we look. That's it. But we don't introduce ourselves, do we? As, hello, I'm Homo sapien. No, I'm German. These are cultural divisions, and that wouldn't matter, as I say, until we drop it down to the planet. So we control bits of the planet until we get to the oceans. Nobody controls the oceans. Nobody owns the Atlantic. Nobody owns the Pacific. We've got these silly little imaginary lines called territorial waters, which are a joke themselves. They're drawn on a piece of paper, or they're drawn on the internet, but they don't have any. That mean there's no net. There's no wall. So it's ridiculous. In the English Channel here, 1 minute, the cod's swimming along, and it butts into a net hanging over the side of a hull trawler. And it's called, it's a British cod. Well, if it swims a bit further along, it might bump into a Dutch net. So it's a Dutch cod. It's just a cod. But, the way that we partition up the planet with silly little boundaries is even more acute in our oceans, where we end up with these territorial waters. What that means is that once you step outside of territorial water, do what you like, mate. Not our business anymore. So there you are, everybody exploiting the deep oceans and open oceans, and nobody managing them. And that's why we end up with this ridiculous situation with plastic, amongst many other things. We are Stone Age. Keep out of my cave, and I promise to keep out of yours. I'm sorry, you can't manage the planet like continuous airspace, continuous oceans, and more or less continuous landmass until we actually start acting like human beings instead of little territorial sovereign state. The planet can't win. I mean, what's the point of having the best environmental legislation and laws and planning in a particular country if the countries around you don't actually match in with that? I'll give you a working example. One of Holland, the Dutch are probably the best in the world in terms of science and technology about water, because a lot of their country lies below sea level. So that's prompted incredible research and incredible understanding of water and the things that go with it. And they're probably the best. They've got the best water treatment technology in the world, bar none. They've got the best legislation to protect water in the world, bar none. But they've got Europe's dirtiest river. Why? Because it doesn't rise in Holland. And therefore they've got no sovereign control over it. They're on the bottom of it. They're in the lower reaches of the watershed. So what they do, go to all that country and say, I say, chaps, would you mind stop doing what you're doing? And you're told, go away. You can't, you've nothing to do with you. And that's our problem. We are a ridiculous species in every respect. And I guess the way we're going will be payback time soon. Okay, a few other things. I've got to wrap up soon because I'm going on and on. I've got to hit forest. The rainforest is disappearing at an incredible rate. That's Borneo. In 1950, it's covered in forest. I was at infant school then. So in my lifetime, look what it's gone. It's gone to virtually nothing. All that's left is the crocodile. We're chopping down 6 hectares of rainforest every second. So remember, it's 2 human beings out of the planet every second. At the same time, we're chopping down 6 hectares. I mean, look at this. We chop down 27,000 trees every day just to make tissues. What sort of a creature is it that can't find another way of wiping its nose apart from on a tissue made from a tree? The problem is that the rainforest contains unprecedented numbers of species that we know nothing about. I mean, going back to the pandemic for a minute, plants, viruses, of course, were here first. And plants have evolved in a period when viruses have been around. They've learned all about it. And plants don't do things for fun. So if a plant has some sort of organic molecule or secondary plant product, the chances are it's going to fend off bacterial or viral infection. There's probably the cure for this virus is probably out there. The cure for diabetes, the cure for cancer, the cure for AIDS, the magic elixir of life. They're all out in the plant world somewhere. But we've only researched less than 5%. For them additional use, what sort of dumb creature is it that we chop down rainforest with species in them that we know nothing about that could be more valuable, priceless, compared with the timber that you're actually making money out of? Biodiversity there's just been a new report. IUCN, that's the International Union for Conservation of Nature. The other one is called WCU, World Conservation Union. They keep publishing these reports and nobody pays any attention to them. We are on the edge of the greatest extinction ever. In fact, the last time we matched this rate of extinction, in the last 600 million years, I'll rattle that through your blooming head, was when that asteroid smacked into what is now modern day Yucatan Peninsula 85 million years ago, and amongst other things, wiped out the big boys, the dinosaurs. That's the mess we're in. We've managed to reduce biodiversity by look at all of those staggering things. 1 in 4 species are at risk of extinction. And human beings, because of our technology, because we live in houses and we're isolated from the environment, we think it's not important to us. No biosphere, we're finished. I had to put up Sudan. That's the last northern white rhino. And he kicked the bucket last year because he was old, an old geezer. And that means there is now no northern white rhino left in Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda. So in the lifetime of many of the local indigenous people there, they've seen this completely harmless herbivore. Rhinos are not aggressive. I've been with rhinos. They're actually big softies. If you annoy them, they're not big softies. They can destroy it. But if you don't, so the thing is hunted because stupid people think that consuming that whole, which is a load of compressed air, is merely an aphrodisiac. Ridiculous. That's sort of statement. Basically, again, I'm really scared about how little people realise about plants. You go to the supermarket, pick up your packet of salad, etc. Tall plants basically keep most of us alive. They're the big boys. And of those, 4 are the most important of all: wheat, rice, maize, potato. Wheat, rice, and maize are all grasses. Potato is solanaceae. And they're all in a complete and utter mess. Every day, 3.5 billion people eat staple is rice. Well, as climate change kicks in, rice yields will drop 15%. Wheat yields will drop 40%. This is going to happen because of the physiology of the plant, the way it uses its own energy in respiration. So, already we're getting 2 human beings per second out of the population, and we're going to have 10% less rice in areas which are critical where it's stable, 30% less wheat. What are we doing? What sort of we're heading for this blooming iceberg, and it's staring us in the face, and we're just ignoring it. So what have you got to do? Well, this is what you've got to do. You've got to accept, first of all, that every system on the planet is inextricably interrelated. I'll just put this little diagram up just to highlight. We recognize basically 3 big systems on the planet: the physical, chemical one, rock, soil, volcanic, all that stuff, the big stuff. We then know there's a living component of the biosphere organized from very process of life itself, right? The biosphere. One of those in the biosphere circle gets clever, develops a capacity for abstract thought. That's called Homo sapiens, and that gives us unique systems. We've got social organizations, so does the rest of the biosphere, but apes don't play at politics, they don't develop economic strategies, they don't sit around on rocks thinking about what is life in philosophical concepts, and they don't have legislation. Those are called cultural systems. These all interact on our planet, they're all intricately interactive, and therefore no one part of studying environment is going to work unless you study the whole lot. That's the basis of the degree in environmental science at Plymouth. That little diagram you see was cooked up nearly half a century ago, and it's our philosophy, if you like. Then it's all linked through what we call resource, energy, and material. They flow in every direction, which basically means that none of these components exist on their own, and none of these systems can operate on their own. It's absolutely right. That philosophy is the same as it was half a century ago. The content, of course, has changed dramatically. So what are you going to do? Well, as far as I'm concerned, I want people trained up, understand the problems that we've been looking at, and we've only skated over a small number. I want them to do something about it. I want them to understand it's going to take a level of cooperation between human beings that is unprecedented if we're going to put any form of stop on what we're doing. Because if we don't, we'll go down. You cannot carry on at the rate of exploitation that we're currently doing, because the planet has limited resources. And even though we're an ingenious creature, and we are, we come up with all sorts of ideas. I was reading about the hydrogen fuel only a couple of hours ago, and looking at how that may or may not work, etc., etc. But we've got to get out there and do something. And I'm really proud of my graduates. They're in at least 30 countries around the world. There's some of them. That terrible mess of sort of word scramble in the bottom there. This was produced by a group called CES, Committee of Heads of Environmental Science. And it's just to highlight the versatility of this degree, degrees in environmental science across the country. I can't think of anything else that's more versatile. There's all sorts of things you can do. And I just put some LinkedIn here. Just found out that the new project director for the Swansea Bay Tidal Lagoon is Andy Jackson, who's just come back from Hong Kong. And you can see the sort of thing. Look up Expedition. See the one here called Director of Expedition. That's EXXX. It's sort of a fancy name. It's this all-girl, all-female crew who have broken all sorts of records around the world. They're involved in, as they sail, they monitor the environment right across all of these oceans. The director of that's a graduate. She's one of our graduates. There's all sorts there, as you can see. We've even got somebody in the cabinet office. We've got them in senior positions all around. But the one I want to go on about in that list, and it's a little bit of a fib because it's not recent, but I just want to draw your attention to one there that says Managing Director of Environment Arabia and Reef Arabia. Just want to give you an idea here of the sort of student that we got. This girl, her dad is from Bahrain, her mum is from Exeter here in Britain. And she came to study with me in the mid-90s, got a first-class honours, went on and did a postgrad, and went back to Bahrain. Now, think about what I'm talking about. We're talking about the Middle East with very different cultural views. And against that backdrop, she decided she's had enough of the mess that that part of the world is in. And one of the things she hooked her teeth into was the complete collapse of coral reefs, which have been fished out and polluted and so on. So she set her own company up. She makes artificial reefs out of recycled material, and she's putting them back in the Straits of Hormuz. It's an unbelievable achievement. She has completely resurrected the coral reefs in the Straits of Hormuz, not for financial reasons at all, because that's the sort of student she is, or graduate rather. That's the sort of person you're going to get on a degree like. She is actually the darling of all of the Straits fishermen, because she's bought the fish bag. So she's almost worshipped wherever she goes around. But that's typical of the sort of student that we get. They're not going to sit on their backsides. They're going to do something about it. Now, for her, particularly, given what goes on in the Middle East, for a female to end up in that sort of position is itself difficult. But despite all of the drawbacks and all of the problems, she's done it. Another one you want to look up EcoTier, ECOT, Tier, TWR. It's a lad called Dan Quilter, who's now running global research groups out of Malaysia. They're literally, I mean, it's just one. They're all over the world. Another one, look about program management, East African Wildlife Service. One of my graduates just told me she's looking after all of the East African management plans for Tanzania, Eritrea, Kenya, Uganda, and she graduated about 10 years ago. So I'm trying to persuade you to join this very special group of students. The Extinction Rebellion is wonderful. It's absolutely the right thing for young people to get angry about what they're inheriting, and they're doing something about it, and they're making their voices heard. And the politicians don't like it because it's not something they can deal with, and it's not something they can actually contradict. And they're running scared because the young people are not asking about political philosophy out of them or stupid, narrow-minded policies. They want the politicians to answer what they're going to do about the environmental mess. And they can't, because it's not what they're used to. It's not the way they've been selling politics for a couple of years. And I'm all for it. But look at the bottom bit. Don't just sit there. Don't just sit there. Come and get the skills and knowledge to do something about it. Because it's your future, isn't it? You're the ones who are going to inherit this mess. And nobody's going to help you. You've got to do it yourself. And the way to do that is to get trained up. Look at Einstein's wonderful quote, isn't he spot on? Two things are certain in this world: the universe and human stupidity. Then he paused and said, and I'm not certain about the universe. He's right. The one thing you can guarantee is human stupidity. And we are stupid. We destroy the very precious systems around us for the sake of short-term economic gain. You can chop down a rainforest tree. It takes 130 years to grow again, and it'll never, of course, regenerate the ecosystem. So that's what it's about. I'm sorry I've blabbed on a lot, but I hope I've got under your skin, and I hope you're thinking about your futures, and I hope you'll have a look at us. You'll do a web call, a Google. It's a new verb, isn't it? I Google, you Google, etc. So have a look at this, and of course, I've put my email links and so on in. You can ask me anything you like. So after that marathon, any questions?
We've had a few on the chat, John.
Okay,
so John McDonald has asked, increased CO2 is leading to oceanic warming, which in turn leads to coral bleaching events. How did coral survive the warm Permian period?
In the past, the trouble is that it's also, if they did, they retreated, but also there was changes in the ocean chemistry at the time, and that's quite important. One of the other things that's happening is never mind just the direct effect of coral reefs, the higher levels of CO2. The levels of CO2 also regulate other cycles in the atmosphere, including UV. And UV is what is causing the bleaching. Not that it's an indirect effect of global warming, as it were. But the other thing is that, as I said, the chemistry of the oceans has changed. And acidification is going at a faster rate. And what we think is, when we look back at the movement of coral reefs around the planet in the past, there's not been the accompanying, there has been a change in acidification, but again, over a slower time frame. That's really the key. It's to do with the time frame. The coral reefs don't have a chance to adapt. It's too fast. I mean, I tell you what, there's no reason. We're going to see more and more viruses because we're walking into the perfect storm in terms of giving viruses exactly what they want. They turn over so fast. So do bacteria. Bacteria goes from baby to adult in 28 minutes. Well, in 28 minutes, it's learned. So what you're doing is, by massive drop in biodiversity, and you're causing extinction in the megafauna, etc., you're leaving the door open for the things that can adapt fast. And those are exactly the things we don't want. There's your bacteria. Does that answer the question, young man? Sorry, I missed your name.
It was John.
Oh, John. Oh, John. Does that answer it, John?
Cool. John also asked, on slide 3 or 4, you talk about the 25 regions that covered 1.4% of land surface. What were these regions? Sorry, John, carry on.
Go ahead, sorry.
And then he said, if I remember the percentages correctly, they seem like a very small area for important regions.
Yeah, they're disproportionately important because they're mainly in the tropics and subtropics. This is where your highest income in solar radiation is, and it's benign conditions, and that's why you have such high biodiversity. So most of these are occurring in Africa, South America, all clustered between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn, with a few outliers, of course. There are, if you like, other areas which are equally important, but much, much more. And the problem is those are the areas where we've got all the problems. We got Africa out of control now in terms of relentless economic development, and they're doing that without any regard really for the longer-term environmental consequences. It's not just Africa. I mean, you go Africa as such. This is a trait of human societies. We tend to go for the fast buck because I guess that's human nature. A lot of people aren't interested or worried about what's going to happen in 100 years' time. They say, "Oh no, I just want to live my life," etc., etc. And that's a moral thing. Depends where you stand, I suppose. I'm very old-fashioned. I believe in not just looking at the immediate situation, but thinking about the responsibility that we carry for being stewards of the planet. See, we're the only thing that can blink and think. We're the only thing that can question our behaviour. If an elephant eats a bit of bamboo, it can't think, well, what's the impact going to be upon bamboo populations if there's a lot of us? But we can, and that carries responsibility. It means that we shouldn't ignore our, if you like, short-term selfishness. Yeah.
Cool. Lucy has said, do you have any particular reading recommendations, articles or books, or any particular favourites?
Books and so on are great, but the trouble with books is they quickly go out of date. There is a fabulous one-size-fits-all website that I check daily and all my students check. It's called ENN, which stands for Environmental News Network. It's a completely independent organisation that does all the work for you. It trawls all the literature on a daily basis and flings out at you punchline and headlines, and then you can double check on that. So you don't need to worry about books. Just hit ENN. You can download it on your mobile as well. It's priceless. It's a wonderful website. You then got slightly more formal ones. IUCN, I mentioned, International Union of Conservation of Nature. They're very good. WCU, World Conservation Union. These all provide, and they're all webby, and they're all good. Just be a little bit careful about pressure group websites. I'm not in any way trying to decry them, but remember, they are putting forward a particular view. And what you've got to learn to do, particularly as an environmental scientist, is to balance that up, look at both ends of the spectrum. So I tend to go for the sort of what I call sort of more conservative and see websites like the other one is United Nations Environment Programme. That's absolutely super. So between those sorts of things, don't worry about books. Just hit the web, because particularly in N, it's daily. It's a daily update. It's blooming brilliant. Yeah, was that Lucy?
Yeah, just Lucy, not Lucy Stevens.
Okay.
Hope has asked, how do you think our political systems need to change to tackle environmental crisis?
That's the biggest question of all, isn't it? I mean, part of the problem is we look at our political systems around. Sorry, phone call coming in. Let me just get rid of it. The political systems are. We've inherited them, haven't we? Most of them emerged really since over the last 300 years. As the Industrial Revolution kicks in, etc., etc. So you're looking at sort of an established political system, and it's not geared for this because all of it's been to do with driving so-called development. It's ridiculous, isn't it, when you switch on the news and they talk about a developed country or a developing country, and it's based upon gross national product. Oh, the economy is growing at 6%, 8%. Well, that's how the politicians work, isn't it? Well, it's over. It doesn't matter any longer whether you're growing at 6%, 8%, or whatever it blooming well is, because the price that you're paying for consumerism is the planet. I mean, our whole economic system is a joke because it's geared towards endless consumerism. There's no end to it, is there? I mean, basically, what are we doing? We're just earning money to buy stuff. That's it. And all you do is you keep developing more stuff, so more people just buy it. There's no final thing. So all the political systems are geared towards that. Changing the political system is the biggest issue of all. But to be fair to a politician, outside of dictatorships or whatever, if you look at so-called democracies, politicians only give you what you want. So it's up to us, isn't it? If people are clamouring for lower taxes, cheaper booze, whatever it blooming well is, well, then the politicians will deliver, won't it? So if we keep up the pressure on them and say, no, I don't care about that. I want to know what you're going to do about this side of the environment. Then they'll realise there's political mileage in it, and then they'll do it. So the answer to the political system lies in us. It's why you see Extinction Rebellion is so important, because the people out on the streets aren't really interested in, the old-fashioned divisions, Labour, Conservative. They're not interested. They're interested in, they want answers to these environmental problems. That's why the politicians are running scared, because their selling points to the young ones, such as yourselves, the ones who are listening, is different from the selling points to say my generation. So the answer is that I'm really pleased. I say one of my graduates is in the cabinet office. Another one is Tom. I can't give you a second name. Tom is now fronting a review of the House of Lords on how we change our environmental laws. We've got people in UNEP, United Nations Environment Programme, right at the top there. The chief advisor on government sustainability strategy in the United Nations as a graduate, etc. So apart from you as individuals asking uncomfortable questions to politicians and saying, I'll vote for you if you do this, and you shouldn't do that. But the other answer is, of course, to get into politics. And that's why our degree, because we teach economics, politics, sociology, social cultural sciences, our graduates are quite comfortable with that, and therefore can get into those sectors. So there's got to be two ways. From outside, the voting populace, inside, having people who are more committed and understanding and sympathetic to the environment than currently are there. So go and change it, everyone. Use your power to vote. All right, it's democracy. Hi, any other questions?
Yeah, we've got 4 more, John, so we'll just rattle through them. I'm going to combine 2, because I think they might be able to be combined. You can tell me if I'm wrong. So the first one is, what can be done to help countries act more as a global community rather than distinct individual nations? And could there be a more sustainable way to manage the oceans?
They're 2 really good questions, and they both hinge on exactly the same problem with sovereignty. The way you're not going to... Okay, I'll give you a working example. Japan, industrialized country, highly developed. In 1948, the world signed up to a no-catch zone in the South Atlantic for blue whales because they were being clobbered. So they asked countries to sign up and say, we promise not to fish them. Certain countries ignore it. The biggest ones are the Japanese because of cultural issues. Okay, how do you make them comply? In the old days, it was easy. The British would send a gunboat and blow them out in the water, and then they had to do what they were told. We can't do that anymore. You can't use force. So what do you use? Well, you use the very thing that's the basis of all of our evil. You use money, don't you? I mean, if you want to bring Japan to heel, it's very simple. You turn around and say, as a consortium of countries, the old East, the EC and us, just turn around and say, as of tomorrow, we ban the import of all Japanese goods, blanket. They would last about 23 days before they'd have to give in because they would economically collapse. So that's how you've got to do it. It's rather like you've got to step into the ring and box, even though you might not want to. And that's the way they change. With the oceans, it's frightening because, again, until we change our mindsets, there's lots going on in terms of ocean protection, but it's all basically voluntary. So in the end, if a country doesn't want to comply, like Japan says, I'm not really going to comply with whaling, you can't do much about it unless you bring in pretty powerful economic sanctions. And that's actually the way to do it. You have to use coercion through economic pressure rather than, for example, military. You can't threaten countries anymore like that was possible a couple of years ago. But if we don't, we start. I mean, no question about that. No point in worrying about the British cod when the rest of the ocean's absolutely clobbered. Does that answer those questions?
Yeah. A lot of people feel that vegan or vegetarian diets are harder and more expensive. How can we educate ourselves and others to disprove this myth?
Well, you've hit a very sensitive point there, because I've been a vegetarian all my life, and I'm at the minute we're researching into veganism. The reason is, there's 2 ways to vegetarian and vegan. There's the aesthetic one. Can we park that for the moment? That's completely valid, and I'm not in any way suggesting otherwise. But the real issue is, if I'm a hard-nosed environmental scientist, I've got to look at this from an environmental point of view. We cannot carry on with the diets that we've got. There's no way. It's got to move more and more towards a vegetarian for a whole raft of reasons. Vegan is particularly attractive. What I'm currently researching, I get a little group together in university. What I'm worried about is that, if someone comes along to me and says, what's the environmental advantages of being a vegetarian? We've got a long period of research into vegetarianism. We can show it. Veganism is a bit different because of the way that the food is being prepared at the minute. There's a lot of ingredients in it. What I want to be careful of is if someone comes along to me and says, would it be better for the environment to be a vegan? I've got to be confident to say yes. So at the minute, we're doing things like life cycle analysis of various other components. The third strand to that, of course, is nutritional. You would need to pay attention to that. But for as far as I'm concerned, that's not an issue. So in the short term, the short answer is if more people become vegetarians, the impact upon the planet will be profound. If we can make sure we get it right with veganism, that it's actually got the minimal environmental impact, that will be even more profound. We can have the most dramatic changes without doing almost anything else, because the consequences of our present diet is disastrous for the planet. Go back to the little statistic I gave you about 20,000 litres of water produce a kilo of beef, and only 200 litres for broccoli. I mean, just think of the impact on water supplies. Just that alone, never mind anything else. So, providing we get the balance right, and it's something I'm really interested in because I have to say this: the quality of vegan food now, compared with say 10 years ago, is fantastically good. But to get to that, that's the problem. They're putting in all sorts of ingredients all over the place. So, I don't want to see avocado from Kenya, for example, necessarily. All this has to be worked out. But it would have the biggest single impact we as human beings could have on the planet is a change in diet. So before all the rednecks shoot me.
Okay. Do you think that COVID-19 will have a positive impact on the environmental sector? We've already seen many countries return to emissions that are higher than pre-COVID levels, but is there still lessons to be learned during the pandemic that we can use to our advantage?
Absolutely. Hasn't it? It's incredible, isn't it? Right in the middle of a blooming viral infection. People talk about game changers for the environment. And I've seen so much coming out of social platforms, the web and so on, about people saying, isn't this an opportunity? For completely horrible reasons, we've now got an opportunity. A door is open. We've seen what can happen when we reduce emissions, for example. And people are now questioning. I'm really pleased to see some of the stuff some of the politicians coming up with. It's going to change. Yes. The old adage, isn't it? Every cloud has a silver lining. I mean, nobody in their right mind would want a pandemic. But it's got people thinking. Part of that, I guess, is because everybody's sitting at home and sick and tired of, Netflix or whatever it is they're watching. Start looking at some serious stuff. Yes, there is a big opportunity. Also, if you're looking at, take our own country, on the verge of bankruptcy as a consequence of this. This is why they allowed the lockdown to go sooner than is actually sensible, because if we don't kickstart the economy, we're in trouble. That's again shows what, we talk about slavery. Slavery is not dead. It used to be physical slavery. Now it's called economic slavery. We're all slaves. We're just slaves to the great god of money. Proven by the fact that you don't get the economies going, you're going under. So you run the risk of not getting rid of the virus to save the economy. You put people second and the economy first. This is ridiculous. But out of that has come some of these strategies that they've been talking about is how we're going to kickstart the economy. And there's a lot of money going to be thrown at so-called green technology. Now, we've got to be careful about that because it might well be, superficially looks okay, but might not be. But you wouldn't have got that in the past. So yes, it's an opportunity, but it comes back to you, young people. Next time some politician stands on your blooming doorstep, throw their portfolio out the window. Say, right, what are you going to do? What are you going to do about this? What are you going to do about reducing energy? What are you going to do about improving public transport, cycle paths, etc.? Look at what's I'm recycling. I'm a cyclist. That's my sport. I can't believe what I've seen. People suddenly digging out bikes that were probably made, 1940, getting on them. People buying new bikes. Councils having to think about cycleways seriously. It's a game changer. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. So yes, it is an opportunity, and hopefully, just hopefully, you can never tell, can you? Hopefully, it will kickstart some genuine response to the environment. But the difference in air quality has been absolutely phenomenal, as everybody knows. And of course, unfortunately, now they're trying to kickstart their economies. But the other problem is, if you're reading what's going on, this sudden little burst of activity in terms of resurrecting the economy. If you look at what the economists are saying, this is temporary. Even in the sort of short, medium term, there's going to be a massive change in manufacture. And that's going to cost people's jobs, yes, but it's also going to change the environment. In other words, we're not going back to pre-pandemic scenarios. It is going to change. Just one, going back to the vegetarian vegan bit, and I don't want to try and influence you. Really, it's up to you. But if you've been reading the press, you'll notice that China has just reported another potential virus, a flu-like one, which they're keeping their eyes on, and it's yet another one that's jumped from animals to human beings. Now, those jumps are not to do with human beings walking through a forest or whatever. They're because of the preponderance across many cultures for fresh food, and therefore they have live markets. If we moved away from live markets, and I travel all over China, Thailand, etc., and I find it quite challenging to go into these places. You imagine if you've got no pigs in live markets, you've got no exotic animals in live markets, but you've got cabbage and you've got broccoli and you've got lettuce, you're going to be safer, aren't you? So again, another plus for me of moving people away from that sort of diet is we can reduce the risk of animal viruses transmitted from animals. So, but that's just a personal view. I would put that's a plus again against being a vegetarian or a vegan. That's got a spin-off advantage.
Okay, we've got 3 more questions, John. Have you got time?
No problem. Fire away.
Okay, how do we deal with population growth? Are we just going to have to let people starve, or is there anything we can do?
Yeah, we're into the cultural world here, aren't we? How do you regulate population? Because you're denying basic human drive, basic human rights. I think it's unrealistic to imagine that we can control populations. China tried it and failed. Quite simply, it failed. It didn't work, and they'll be the first to admit it. It didn't work for a number of reasons. So I think population is here to stay, as it were. In terms of starvation, that is, again, an entirely artificial scenario. We throw away every year something like 3.5 billion tons of food. That is enough to feed all of the people on the planet 10 times over. But we don't, because it's not politically and economically viable as far as these people are concerned, to shift food from one part of the planet to another. It is unacceptable morally that anybody is starving. There is enough food on the planet, even now, let alone what we might be able to do in the future, to solve that issue. It's a political and economic situation. I find that incredibly depressing. But because it costs money to send food to a starving population, you don't do it, because there's no. So also, agriculture is moving at an incredible rate. I see some of the most amazing things going on, which is heartwarming. Trouble is that our staple diets, wheat, rice, maize, potato, they've been messed around with over the last 10,000 years. Genetically, they're very genetically anemic because we've selected stuff that we want rather than what the plant needs, and they're very vulnerable. So you've got to look for new food sources. You've got to go back to the wild ancestors and try and blend. I'll give you a classic example. The wild ancestors for wheat, triticum, are in Helmand province in Afghanistan. So you've got no chance of sending research teams into there to look for wild ancestors before they're actually lost to science. There's all sorts going on. The vertical farming, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Again, I know I'm banged on about it, but it's much easier to grow plants than it is to grow animals in every respect. The space, you eat, a cow eats grass, so in theory, why don't you just eat the grass, as it were? Well, the answer is you should, because again, you lose. Any of you studying biology, in your A-level biology, if your syllabus has looked at it, you'll know that the thing called trophic levels. These are the number of steps away from primary productivity. So the trophic level number one are all the autotrophs, the plants that convert light energy to chemical energy. The next level up are the things that eat the plants, the herbivores. Then the next level up, the carnivores. You get to the point where you don't have any higher trophic levels. And the reason for that is that within any given trophic level, 90% of the energy that's fixed is used by the organisms in there. So a plant of 100 units of energy that it captures from the sun and uses, 90 units it uses for itself. That's what it's there for. Plant isn't there to provide food. It's there to make itself strong, big, and reproduce. So that means that only 10 units are available to the herbivore out of the original 100 that it can use. And it uses 90% of that. It's only 1% gets passed on to the next level. So you reach limits. The higher up the trophic levels you go, the more energy you lose. And therefore the answer is to minimize that. The answer to minimize that is to plants. It's that simple. From an ecological point of view, ecological energetic, that's the way you would need to go. Of course, there's other reasons you can't do that. Can't just eat grass. Well, you can, but the modified ones. So yes, that's how it's going to go, I think. I was talking to some top Japanese agronomists recently. They're brilliant with rice. They've got some of the best rice research in the world. They're now at about 12 crops per year off of one plant. That's it. Can't squeeze any more out of it. So we've got to start thinking about alternatives, particularly in those countries which are heavily dependent upon rice as a staple, with 2 human beings per second being happy. Okay?
Thanks, John. Why study environmental science over just a straight geography degree?
Good question. And geography, in my view, should have evolved into environmental science. Geography covers all the same issues. The problem with geography is it's not as interdisciplinary. What I mean by that is that geography divides itself into 3 camps: physical geography, biogeography, and so-called human or social geography. And although they're covering the same material, they don't formally, through the program, interact. That's what environmental science does. That's the difference. That's basically the difference. So you end up with a human geographer knowing less about physical geography and biogeography, biogeographer knowing less about physical geography, human geography, etc. On environmental science, of course, you don't. They will know everything. That's why they're in the jobs when they are. That's why they're in these top jobs, because they're just as comfortable on the ball with socioeconomic and political and ethical material as they are with, say, some physical aspect of the play or some living bit. They're genuinely interdisciplinary. That's why we designed it. That's what we saw. Plymouth was one of the first in Europe to develop an interdisciplinary environmental science degree. And we've got 50 years of experience of understanding that, how it works. And the proof of the pudding is those graduates spread across the world in every sector to do with it. And that's basically the difference. We're genuinely interdisciplinary. Geography, I would say, is multidisciplinary. It's the same argument as doing just, say, a straightforward biology degree or a geology degree or whatever it's going to be. They focus in on a particular aspect. Nothing wrong with that. We need it. But environmental science is a much, much more interdisciplinary approach. And it seems to be what the market wants. We've developed a sister program, runs parallel, called Environmental Management Sustainability, because I was getting a lot of feedback from employers, organizations, governments, etc., that they've got the message now about environmental problems. They really have got the message, and they want more skill and knowledge in terms of coming up with environmental management strategies, with sustainability policies, etc. So we've turned the screw. So we developed a sister program that you can swap between the two at the end of year 1 that enables you to be more of that sort of environmental scientist, policy and management and sustainability issues, than maybe environmental monitoring, biodiversity, all of those sorts of things. So we try to increase the versatility and knowledge base of our graduates to make them even more employable. I have to be a little bit careful when I say employable, because for me, it's not the word employable isn't quite right. It's what I call useful. I want graduates who are going to have an impact. Because if they don't, who else is? Is a civil engineer going to do it? Is your English graduate going to do it? No, they can't. There is no one going to save the planet apart from you. If any of you are old enough, or ever go, well, not old enough. If you go on any of the film websites or YouTube, you can click onto some of these 1950s cowboy films. Something I went to went to the Saturday morning cinemas when I was a nipper. And they're always the same, always the same story. You've got a wagon train going west, and they run into the nasty Apaches or the Comanches or wherever it is. And there they are all circling around, going, what, firing arrows at them. And all the people in the wagon train, all clutching each other. Oh my God, we're going to get slaughtered. And then suddenly, miraculously, over the horizon with a bugle, da-da-da-da-da, comes John Wayne and the 7th Cavalry. Come to rescue you, man. And everybody goes out, oh, great, they're safe. Well, who's the cavalry for the planet? There isn't any cavalry. There is no John Wayne and 7th Cavalry, Lance, whatever is coming over the horizon. There's just you and me. The only people who can save this planet are human beings, and someone's got to stand up. And it's a tough decision, isn't it? How much do you put towards looking after the planet? How much you put looking after your own lifestyle? I've got to say, it goes all the way back to the Bible, doesn't it? The Samaritan. It's a Friday night, isn't it? Everybody's out on the pop. Wahoo, fights everywhere, and he's going home, isn't he? And he sees some bloke all smacked up in the gutter, and everybody walks past, don't they? You've done it. We've all done it. But this Samaritan says, "Last, it's just going to cause me a lot of hassle," and so. And he picks him up, doesn't he? Well, that's the human spirit, isn't it? That sometimes you have to do things that are uncomfortable, that you might not want to do. But if you don't do them, who is? Nobody else. So that's why your generation has been the worst treated of all. It faces more problems than any other generation of human beings since we've evolved. And you've got one choice. You either do something about it or you face the consequences. And it's no amount of money is going to make water run out the tap when there's no more water. No amount of money is going to put rice on the table when there's no more rice to eat. And no more money is going to buy you clean air if you can't walk around without a face mask on. So that sounds horrible, but that's really the choice. Stand up, do something about it. I'm a trendy lefty from the 60s. We were all, we shall fight, we shall win, Paris, London, Rome, Berlin, all of this stuff. And one of my great heroes was a Cuban peasant. His name was called Enrico Zapata. And he was illiterate. And Cuba was under the most terrible colonial power. They were literally starving to death. So this man used to go around, Enrico used to go around the villages and slap them around the face and say, "Listen, you idiots, you might as well fight, mightn't you? Because you're going to die anyway." And he came up with a great phrase. I thought, better to die standing up than live on your knees. Well, that's what being a human being is about, isn't it? Not living on your knees and saying, "Oh, I can't do anything about it." Stand up and do something. Of course, in his case, they shot him. So you get the T-shirt along with Che Guevara. But you get the message. You've got to do something because it's not going to solve itself. And nobody else is going to come and help you. It's up to you. And the way to do that is to get the skills and knowledge to do something about it. That's what we hope we do at Plymouth. I don't know whether we're the best or whatever. All I know is that we believe in what we're doing. And I'm really privileged to work with other academics who have the same sort of outlook that we want to do something about it. And I have to say, the students are just unbelievably good because they're interested. They actually want to do this, want to do something about it. That, and the fact that they're spread across 50 countries around the 50 countries, whatever it is, says we must be getting something. Right? So, any more questions?
Last one, John. Is environmental science a good degree to study if I'd like to go into meteorology in the future?
The short answer is no. Meteorology is a highly specialized subject, to say the least. And even if you did things like most, say, geology degrees, you would be hard pushed. Meteorology is a specialist subject, and it's important. And if you want to do it. Because we need meteorologists as much as we do anywhere else. Of course, on an environmental science degree, we'll be playing around with consequences of some of the people studying meteorology, but it wouldn't be a mainstream component. It'd be mixed up with everything. So no, I wouldn't do that. If that's what you want to do, meteorology, there are half a dozen places in the country, really good universities with a long history and tradition of that subject. You can Google them. If that's what you really want to do it. But of course, we're linked with the meteorology research unit at Exeter, for example, so we do bring experts in, and we do talk about various aspects of it, as well as climate, of course. But really, it's a different specialist degree.
Amazing, thanks, John. Can you hear me, John?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. That's it.
I was waiting to press the pause.
Thank you for coming, guys. I'm sure if you do have any further questions, John, you're more than happy to receive emails, aren't you?
Absolutely, 1000%.
Amazing. Well, I hope you will have a lovely afternoon, and thanks again, John.
Okay, thanks, everyone. I'll just leave you with one thing. Whatever you do in life, make sure you do what you want to do. Take all the advice on board from everybody, but follow your heart, please. It's so important in life. If you follow your heart, you'll be happy and you'll do the right thing. I hope it's environmental science, but if it's playing the drums, play the drums. Good luck to you all, and for goodness sake, look after yourself in this present situation, and don't relax your discipline. The virus is still here. Goodbye, everyone.
Hi, John.
Okay, thanks, Shauna. Thanks so much.